Welcome to the Krista Redpath Show, where sports take center stage and stories come to life. I'm your host, Krista, veteran analyst and passionate storyteller, bringing you weekly in-depth conversations and sharp analysis across the world of sports. The Krista Redpath Show, breaking down the game, elevating the story, and championing the female voice. Today's show is proudly brought to you by Vertical Raise, your premier online fundraising platform, and the Big Sky Conference, where experience is elevated. This week on the Krista Redpath Show, I'm continuing to take you around the Big Sky in women's hoops, and our next stop is in Greeley, Colorado. Today, I'm joined by Kristen Mattio, the head women's basketball coach at the University of Northern Colorado, now in her 5th season leading the Bears. Since arriving in 2021, Coach Mattio has steadily elevated the program, highlighted by a statement overtime upset of Big 12 opponent BYU on November 23, 2024, a win that also marked the 200th victory of her coaching career and a historic milestone in Northern Colorado's Division I era. Mattio has guided the Bears to their highest win total since the 2018-2019 season, a memorable Big Sky tournament run that included an upset of top-seeded Idaho State and a program-wide commitment to excellence, with 8 players earning Winter Academic All-Big Sky honors last season. Before arriving in Greeley, she built one of the nation's most consistent Division II programs at West Texas A&M, winning 4 conference titles and making deep NCAA runs, reaching the Elite 8. Coming up, we'll dive into Coach Mattio's journey, her approach to building culture, and what continues to drive her leadership in the Big Sky. Coach Mattio, it is such an honor to welcome you in.
Krista, I have not missed a podcast, so I'm loving what you're doing, and of course, really appreciate all the work that you're doing with Big Sky women's basketball.
Kristen, before we dive in to Northern Colorado and the Big Sky, I want to start at the beginning. You grew up in Nashville, Tennessee. What was that environment like, and how did basketball become a part of your life?
Well, a lot of it was through my dad, my grandfather. But if I grew up in Tennessee, you know that's the Lady Vols with Pat Summitt. And that was a big piece of my journey. So I actually watched Vanderbilt quite a bit and University of Tennessee. Actually, Pat Summitt was recruiting one of my teammates. I had a 6'6", 6'7" post player when I was in high school. And Pat Summitt grew up right next to where I grew up at, so in Cheatham County, Tennessee. I played AAU basketball in the city that she grew up in. And so from looking afar, obviously, it was just something that we loved to watch as a family, the Lady Vols. And because Pat Summitt was recruiting one of my teammates, she was at all of our games. Of course, she spoke at our end of the year banquet. And so, you know, whether it was my dad, grandfather, or just growing up in the state that I grew up in, you know, just the love of basketball grew.
Well, Pat Summitt, I mean, just amazing. 18 Final Fours, 32 Elite 8s. She never had a losing season. Did you ever get to any games?
I did. I loved it. I loved to go. And of course, we loved the Tennessee Vandy games because those were 2 big rivals. You know, and as a matter of fact, with Pat Summitt, because she was coming to our high school, she would speak to us quite a bit. But once I became a coach, so I was at Montana State. So fast forward now, you know, after college, my first coaching job was at Montana State. And I saw her on the road recruiting in Chicago. And she was sitting there eating a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And I reminded her who I was. I was like, you recruited my teammate. You spoke at all these events when I was in high school. And I said, do you have any advice? Just getting into coaching. And her advice back to me was, you know, if you can't do anything else in life, then coach. And I started like laughing. And as she kept eating her sandwich, and she kind of like smiled at me. We talked a little bit more, but I always took that to heart. And now you understand, because of holidays, there's a lot of things that you give up and sacrifice. But that was her advice, I guess, that she gave me. If you can't do anything else in life, then coach. And so I guess I can't do too much else outside of this.
How did that era of Tennessee basketball influence your expectations as a player?
I think, you know, I was really fortunate in high school, and honestly, every place I've been very blessed to win championships. So as player, and then obviously from the coaching side, which is even tougher, I feel like, from the coaching side. But there was just this level of expectation of winning. And in high school, you know, we made it to the state tournament numerous times. And I was at a high school that once we started having success, and this was not normal, the stands were packed. And we were just drawing thousands of people to our high school games. Now, of course, I told you I had a 6'6" teammate. I had another player that went on to play for Mississippi State. She was 6'2". So we had a really, really good high school team. But there was just this expectation in the state to win and do it at a high level. And, of course, when you have the colleges around that are doing that, University of Tennessee, that helps set the stage too. And every little girl, as a matter of fact, when my grandfather passed away, my dad was helping go through some of the stuff, and he found this folder, and my grandfather had written Pat Summitt a letter, and he kept a copy of it, but basically telling Pat Summitt I should be on his radar, which I should not have been on her radar. I was not tall enough, but not quick enough. But, he was literally telling her that what I do, my strengths and everything. And I still have that. I have it in my office at home of just, that's how much my grandfather loved it and loved the game. He actually built our first couple basketball hoops. And you couldn't imagine that. He built a 10-foot, and then it was like 6.5, 7 feet where we could dunk on it. And he helped install those when I was younger. And so basketball was everywhere through my family, through the state that I lived in. I loved it.
Did he spend some time with you, shooting? Did he rebound for you? Or was that something that your dad helped you with?
Yes. I think his little statement that really didn't resonate to me, and it's not magic, but he would just always say, if you can dribble, you can go wherever you want to on the court. And I tell my point guards that all the time, because obviously I was a point guard, but literally if you can dribble, you're not limited to where you can physically go on the court when that ball is in your hand. And so, that was something that stuck. I think we were celebrating my grandparents' 50th anniversary in Chicago, because that's where my dad's side of the family is from. And it was so this kind of leads into a little bit of the Chicago where they were raised. But my dad, when we pulled up to this event, it was the 50th wedding anniversary. He said, you guys are not leaving. You can't leave my sight. You got to stay at this dinner. And it was during Chicago Bulls playoff run. And my brother and I were so disappointed. And I'm the oldest of 5 in my family. But all we wanted to do was watch this game. And here we had to go to the event. So we're in the middle of this dinner, and my grandfather taps us on the shoulder, and he's like, come here with us. And literally we found this bar on the side that nobody was in, and the Bulls game was playing. And he let us watch it. And that's just so memorable for me, because I love the game. I loved it. And hear my dad saying, you can't leave. You can't leave the table. This is not for you. It's for your grandparents to honor them. And my grandfather, the one we were honoring, pulls us to the side, and we go watch hoops together. So those are some of the lasting memories that, I have of him.
Isn't that awesome, though, those relationships that you have that you'll never forget? Obviously, this Bulls team, they won 6 NBA championships. They were pretty much dominant in the 90s. Do you remember the game or around the time?
I don't even remember. We just played DePaul in Chicago, and I was talking to their coach because she's Italian as well, and she grew up in that city. And I was literally saying, here's where my dad grew up. She knew exactly the city. And then she spit out the name of the high school. And so it was just a time where, yes, I'm a big Michael Jordan fan. I love a lot of other professional athletes, NBA players too. But growing up, was just right at the end or beginning of the era of the WNBA.
Yes.
And so, my dad was also a pastor. So my parents owned a printing company, and I had to work in that a lot growing up. But then he was a pastor of a church. And the moment church would get done, I would run home on a Sunday, turn that Bulls game on, and made sure that I watch it. So it's just kind of how I grew up, and it was within the family, because they all watched, Chicago teams as well.
Well, and I feel like I grew up that way. We were big Boston Celtics fans, but we're similar in our age, Kristen. And I feel like, we didn't have as many females yet to look up to. And now the whole trajectory of women's basketball has really shifted. But I remember Boston Celtics games being on, and I'd go out and shoot in my slanted driveway with my rubber Larry Bird basketball, and I would create scenarios of, I'm, at the line, we're down by 1 and we're playing the Lakers, in my 12-year-old mind. That was the biggest stage in Great Falls, Montana. But I love to hear that, because I feel like those are the moments, though, that inspire you, right? And they really, really take a hold of you. Do you feel like that was when you decided that, hey, I want to make basketball a part of my life. I want to play this in college, and I want to go on and possibly coach?
Yeah, I guess once I started playing, I never saw myself not playing the game. And I literally deeply had this love to just be in the gym. And I could be, again, back to my parents owned this printing company. My mom did graphic design. My dad did more of the print shop side of it. And me being the oldest, I always just told him, you're so lucky that you have a daughter that will do all this stuff and get in the print shop and get their hands a little dirty. but I would be doing the most boring, mundane things. And I'm talking about collating or just doing 1,000 of the exact same things. And so now translate that into the gym, because some of the best players are okay with doing the most boring, mundane things over and over and over. And I was okay with that. And that's where the love of the game really grew for me, because I love the processes behind it. I love working on one move or something that I wanted to be really good at. And those processes now I take on today. I was actually just talking to our team the other day about this print shop thing, because my dad would always say, inspect what you expect. And because we had to do this, we did the work and then we had to deliver it to the customers. It had to be excellent in what we were doing. And so now you train something like that. We inspect what we expect. So we do watch film so we can, really focus on the expectations that we have on the court. And so, yes, there was at a young age just this work ethic. But through the lens of basketball, I loved it. I love the team aspect. I love the sisterhood behind it of teammates. And I would say I'm not the most extroverted, outgoing person, but that team dynamic allowed me to probably flourish more. But then the introverted side, where I could just be in the gym with the ball in my hand, for a couple hours, I love that side of it too.
It just all makes sense, right? I feel like when you have a basketball in your hands, to me, I would not want to go out on a track and just sprint. Put a ball in my hands, I'll sprint anywhere. On the court, meaning I'll dribble all over. And I actually recently just found, do you remember those dribbling glasses? Did you ever use those? I still have mine. And I found them recently and was like, oh my goodness, I used to dribble around the block with these things, once with my left hand, then with my right hand. Just memories like that are great. So you went on to play at Evangel University in Springfield, Missouri. So this is about 8 or 9 hours from home. What was it like leaving Tennessee and stepping out on your own for the first time?
I had a great experience in college, and it really, lays the groundwork for myself as a coach, because when I can speak to our players and our recruits, I loved my college experience. So we just played in Omaha, Nebraska, University of Nebraska, Omaha the other day, and my college roommate and her husband and their 4 kids lived there. And literally she met me at the hotel, and, she stayed, and I'd go to bed early, but she came over. It was like, I don't know what time we got done with everything, but we talked for several hours. It's like we didn't miss a beat, right? And so she was my teammate at Evangel, and she was actually my social planner, is what she would call herself. She would come in on a Monday or Tuesday, say, don't plan anything. We're going to go do this on Friday. And I was like, okay. But my time at Evangel, it's actually a private, Christian school. And my faith is really important to me too. And so it wasn't intentional about selecting a school like that, but it was really good for me. It really helped lay the foundation for just kind of how I view things today and how I function. We were able to win championships there. So I think that's at what level. It wasn't Power 5, but still to be a part of winning and that success and what that looks like. I still keep in contact with my college coaches. I had a husband and wife duo. So the husband was the head coach and the wife was his assistant. And so we're all still really close and we stay connected. So great experience, and I wouldn't trade it for anything.
So you were the starting point guard and the team captain. What did leadership mean to you at that stage in your life?
That's a great question. We talk about it a lot here because sometimes some of it's natural. It's hard to look back and say, but you just know every year you're learning and you're growing. Specifically from that point guard spot, we all know you're an extension from the coach, right? Isn't that kind of the saying of what it is? So there's a communication behind it. But I think no matter what I felt like from the point guard position, if I was out there, I could control whether we won or lost. And I know that sounds crazy, but I knew, once we scored, what I was going to say to get our team to get that stop. I knew once we got that stop, I was going to push it down the floor and say, run with me, let's go, let's figure out how to score quickly. And so I think the leadership, it's through experience. I don't think I was great in year one. As a freshman, you just don't know what you're stepping into. But the more you study and become a student of the game, I think that's where you learn to connect with your teammates. And every teammate has a different personality. And so you just learn to connect with them, speak with them in different ways, and to help get the best out of them so our team can be the best.
So I feel like as a point guard, you're responsible for not only managing people and as much as plays, but like, how much did that prepare you for coaching?
If the rest of the coaches heard this in the league, I always say point guards make the best coaches, and that's probably not fair. Maybe Coach Ben, I'm sure there's some other coaches that would agree with that. I just think from that point guard position, you just like study the game differently. I don't know why. There's just a different expectation, on it. And honestly, my point guards too, I just met with a couple of them the other day, and we went back through of just this role of that point guard and how you have to lead sometimes above and beyond just the normal positions out there on the floor, and how sometimes you have to be a covering for those teammates that forget things or don't know what's going on. And we literally talked about, it's like this is like a John Maxwell leadership thing where he talks about you have to see more, and you have to see more before everybody else does. And so that becomes a big piece of what that point guard, and then there's a whole bunch of adjectives you can say, well, they're level-headed, they're steady, oh, they're tough. You learn to use these different, dynamics all throughout the game to hopefully propel your team to win.
So I feel like you have won at every level you've been at, but those Evangel teams had real success. So conference titles, NAIA tournament appearances, a Sweet 16 run. What did that level of competition teach you?
I just think, I go back to the processes of everything. Is I literally, how I played is kind of a little bit of how I function, is I always took it one game at a time. And I know this sounds crazy, but if we played a team in our league that was like at the bottom of the league, I would get nervous that my teammates were going to just like get comfortable and slack off a little bit and not study the scout. And you're saying, well, that's probably why you're a coach today. Probably why, because I wanted to win so bad. And I didn't care who you were. I didn't care what level it was. I wanted to make sure that we were prepared for those moments. So the ability to, it's so hard to win. And it's hard to do it as a player and as a coach. So when we got to cut down nets and win championships, I think it's really special. Outside of, I will add in the men's team one year won it all. They literally won the national championship. And that was kind of like a punch in my gut because I wanted to win so bad. And I think that year we made it to the Sweet 16. There's nothing like winning and doing it with a group of young ladies that you love to be around, having that camaraderie and sisterhood. And you play from Montana. You understand that feeling of once you connect and see everybody, it could be, several years and you haven't talked to somebody, but you just never miss a beat because you were so connected.
You are. And it's an interesting bond, right? It's one that's hard to explain to people that haven't been a part of it. And I think you nailed it earlier, Kristen, when you talked about the fact that there could be time that passes, but you just pick right back up where you left off. Do you have any like group text threads? Do you stay in touch with multiple teammates where you're talking about relevant things, but also maybe taking just a little trip down memory lane here and there?
Yeah, we stay in touch. I don't probably stay in touch as good as you would think that I would.
You're busy.
Even as I told you, I saw my roommate the other day. We took pictures. She had her whole family at the game. Some of my players were like, who are those people that were going crazy over there? I'm like, that's my roommate. Actually, 2 years ago, we were in Nebraska too, and I brought my roommate into the locker room. And I was like, this is what this looks like. This is what it means. And we are literally sisters for the rest of our life. I was in her wedding. And so to show our players that, this can be done the right way and this thing can last for as long as you make it. So I don't know if I missed that question or if I answered the full question.
I think it was awesome. It was the most perfect answer.
The text is or the group.
Yeah, I mean, it's fun to.
When I saw her, yes, she found the group message that we have with all of our players and our coaches that are in it too. And she sent the picture, saying that we connected here when we were down here. So yeah, I think it's awesome. And we never connect enough is probably the best way to say it too.
So your coaching career started quickly after college, and one of your early D1 stops was right here in the Big Sky in the state of Montana in Bozeman. You were an assistant in Bozeman under Greg Kudera. And during a transitional time for the program, what do you remember about those early coaching years?
A lot. I loved my time at Montana State. And to just rewind a little bit, I was in college my last year, and I literally did this internship with the athletic director at Evangel University. And he happened to know the coach at that moment. Her name was Robin Patera Haskins. And I did this internship, and my job that summer was to redo their whole manual for the athletic department. Well, I told you I grew up in a print shop and graphic design. That was like nothing for me at the time. So I did all this stuff. He loved it. And then he was like, what are you doing? I was like, well, I want to go be a GA somewhere. At that time, I was like, there's nothing else for me to do outside of, I guess, stay in basketball and coach if I can. So that's what I was trying to do. He was like, I know this person that coaches at Montana State. So we got connected. And at that time, they only had 2 full-time assistants. And so we just stayed connected. And then literally the day before I graduated, she called and said, hey, we are creating a 3rd assistant coaching job. And of course, it was like 3/4 time. It wasn't even full time, but it was enough to get, like, I had benefits and everything. So I literally, when I was in college, I worked at this, it's called Kids Across America. It's like a Christian sports camp, and we brought in kids from all across the U.S., like major cities. So I literally worked that camp in the summer and went right to Bozeman, and I committed to that job without even, I'd never been to Montana, the state of Montana. I'm a Tennessee girl, so I had no clue what I was getting myself into, but I committed to the job, showed up, and I spent 2 years there. And yes, there was a coaching change. Yeah. So when Greg took over, he was an assistant that was elevated. And honestly, what makes this thing really cool is, we talk about Coach Benford, how much she's built that program, because I was a part of that last coaching staff, and she came in and she is still there. But my time in Bozeman, I knew nothing about snow and mountains. And my one story is, when our first home game, when I was at Montana State, we literally had several feet of snow. And I had a Ford Taurus. It was all paid off, but I had this Ford Taurus that was not built for the snow. And I lived about 20 minutes away with some roommates that I had met and had. And literally, I went right off the side of the road on the very first home game going to the gym. Oh. And there was so much snow that the car didn't flip. It literally, and it went into, and this is probably too much information, but I hit into this, there was a big ranch, and I hit into the fence where the animals were. I literally just busted up the whole entire fence. And so luckily my roommate, I called her. I was like, what do I do? It's like nobody was home. So she brought her car. She talked to the neighbors. And I went to the game. This is my first coaching game at Montana State. I was 22. I didn't know what I was doing. And so that night, I knew I was going to have to, the next morning, go speak to that guy who I broke his fence. And I grabbed a whole bunch of game tickets. I don't know why, but I did. So the next morning, I literally got up early, and I was like, I need to go meet with him. So I met the guy. He opened up his front door. I said, sir, I'm the one who broke your fence. I literally drove my car through it. I'm so sorry. And I was like, I will pay for it. I will make it all right. Don't worry about it. And he was like, young lady, you're not going to touch my fence. You don't need to do anything with my fence, but I do need one thing from you. And I was like, what is that? He was like, I want game tickets. And so my roommate must have said that. Told him I was a coach. And I literally pulled out of my back pocket this stack of game tickets. And I was like, how did this happen? I mean, I had no clue that that's what he was going to ask for, but that's what I brought. And that was my first home game at Montana State, driving off into the ditch. I got a better car after that.
That is a classic Montana story. And also how friendly everyone is. So that is fantastic. Mm-hmm. What did being in the Big Sky teach you as a young coach?
Well, one for me is I had never traveled that side of the country. And so, it was really cool just to, and when we have players from Texas and all across the U.S., and I know they haven't been to the Montanas or Portland or Eastern, I could go to every state. And so first you're just learning that whole side of the country, depending on where you were raised at. But it really, and I heard, I think Coach Gleason talk about this, how good of a conference this is and how strong it is, and how we probably don't get enough recognition because we're not in that top third, but we are in the top of the middle third with the strength of our conference and what it looks like in the level that, the top teams compete at. And so I think quickly that's what you take away. And a lot of the coaches, like we were talking about this earlier, but CT, who now, does the play-by-play at Weber State and does the end of your podcast, she was the head coach there too. And so it's cool to see a lot of the people that either are still a part of it or, have transitioned on. But it was a great experience for me.
And it is interesting when people say, they'll even say to me, hey, Krista, why haven't you moved on? And I'm like, what do you mean? Like, I feel like I get to move on by covering the entire Big Sky. And do you know who I played for? I played for Robin Selvig, who stayed in one spot for all those years. So we get very comfortable, and it's just been great to be able to be a part of seeing our league grow. And I think that's really neat because we're seeing more and more women's coverage, and I think that's just fantastic. And that's such a credit to all of you. But it is an interesting conversation because Also, I will allude to the fact we are spread out. The Big Sky is spread out all throughout the U.S. And I think on that western half, when you look at that road trip, when you have to go to NAU and UNC for these teams, that's quite a haul. And you would probably say the same thing when you come up to Montana. It's no easy feat to go from Missoula over to Bozeman, even though it's only 2.5 hours. You might incur quite a bit in those 2.5 hour drive.
Yeah, I hear a lot of coaches talk about the road trip to UNC and to NAU.
They do. They bring that up.
I get what they're saying. I wish there was something I could do. Maybe have them over for dinner or something to make it a little easier in the future. I'm just kidding. But I do get, that it's different. Actually, this year, our Montana trip is split up. So we get to travel to Montana twice. So that's a little bit different for us. But, back to the time in Bozeman, unless you're there, you don't understand. So for years, I even kept up, even when I wasn't coaching in this league, of, the Grizz Bobcat. And anytime it was football, I'd look up those schedules, the basketballs, I'd see who win, because it was just such a big deal when those teams played. And so, yeah, that was a special place. And yes, the whole entire league, it is a very special league too.
So from there, your career takes you to West Texas A&M, which becomes a defining chapter for you, Kristen. You worked closely with Mark Kellogg, who you also worked alongside in Bozeman, and you built one of the top Division II programs in the country. What made that run so special?
I think first starting with Mark Kellogg, he's at University of West Virginia right now, and him and I worked together for almost 10 years, and that included our time together at Montana State. And his wife is from the state of Montana too. Starting with him is I was really fortunate to be around somebody that was a winner. There was a consistency behind how he showed up. He was a mentor. He's only 4 years older, but he was like an older brother. For me, we still stay connected. I could talk to him once a week. Now we're on a 2-hour different time zone change right now, so it makes it a little bit more difficult. But, the way I actually moved with him. So we worked at several schools together. As a matter of fact, 3 different colleges together. And that was a big piece of something that I wanted to be a part of, is taking over a program and seeing what that looked like, of how to lay this foundation, how to build the relationships with the current players, even though maybe you were not the original coach that brought him in, and then how to build it to success. But now fast forward to the West Texas, that was a place that was very much like a Montana State now for women's basketball, that if you go in that place, there's 30-something championship banners. And so it wasn't really something that we did, but we were able to carry on at West Texas A&M. And by then, when Mark got there, he was in year 10 as a head coach. So he literally, I was a part of working with him. We worked at 2 different places. We took 2 different teams to 2 national championship games at the D2 level. And it happened one time here at Fort Lewis College here in Durango, Colorado. And I thought to myself as an assistant, I'm like, oh, you'll never have that opportunity again. And then we get to West Texas, and the first year that group goes to the national championship game too. And so just being a part of that, again, seeing that success, what it takes every day. And I always use the word consistency, because that's what he talks about. Is just he just says, I always just want to be the same person every day, of how I show up and what the kids see every day. And that, was something that I was able to carry on as I became a head coach as well.
Well, that's what I was just going to say. You eventually take over as head coach, and you continue and you sustain that level of success, conference titles, NCAA tournament runs, Elite 8 appearances. What did the head decision-making role teach you?
Well, first you learn a lot about yourself, and you got to have really good self-awareness. And, you know a lot of answers when you're an assistant, or you can give a lot of thoughts and an opinion, but it's way different when you're that head coach. And it feels different when you're communicating to a player too, because, no matter what, there's a vision for where you're taking the program. But you also have a vision for each player too. Every coach wants their players to love them to an extent, right? And so it feels different to where an assistant, you can be a little upset or something, you can just spit out something. But when you're the head coach, it does matter, those that 2 feet over, as they say on the bench. So a lot more decision making, and of course a lot more trust in just having a great staff too, because I go back to that. I have an assistant that's worked with me for a lot of years, Camille Perkins, and she's actually from the state of Texas. And even here, our staff has been together for a couple of years now too, but same thing at West Texas. So it's the staff as well, and having a great administration that literally believes that you should be winning a national championship and having success. At least that was at the D2 level. So I think all of that, I had the support that we needed to continue it on.
Visiting with the head coach of the University of Northern Colorado, Kristen Mattio, proudly brought to you by the Big Sky Conference and Vertical Raise. Well, Coach Mattio, let's bring it back to Northern Colorado. You arrive in Greeley in 2021, and now you're in your 5th season. But what were your priorities when you first took over the program?
Really to stabilize the program. So there was, I think it was 4 coaches. I think I had 4 coaches in like 5-year span, 5 or 6 year span. So it was a lot of quick turnover. And you think about alumni and people like that, they're like, what's going on? Who's the coaches there now? And when we got here, it was the end of May, early June. And so we had 5
it's not a lot of time
roster. And we had signed 4 or 5 kids at West Texas, and some of them were previous Division I. They had played at the D1 level, and we actually ended up bringing them here with us just to start that first year because we had to put so many people, fill that roster with so many people. My word is, and this is not demeaning towards the group we had because I loved them, but it felt like a hodgepodge team. We were older, but we were not old in playing a lot of games together. And so it really became just to stabilize and begin to talk about who we want to become. I had a lot of 1-year kids. So then it was, how can we make this 1 year last a lifetime? Because I knew I was only going to have them for 8 months and then they're going to be graduated and they're gone. So, it was a lot of work that first year, and it always is a lot of work, and it still doesn't end after that. But just a lot of investment of, as you know, you're in a new athletic department. So it's as something as your receipts are done differently sometimes, or just the communication from the admin and the AD. So you're just learning and growing a lot and really learning your environment, learning Greeley, Colorado, the type of people that are here and the passion that they have for women's basketball. So I think it was all encompassing that first year.
You guided UNC to some major milestones. In 2021, you did take down the number 1 seed, Idaho State. That's very impressive, Coach Mattio. And also an overtime upset of BYU in 2024 that marked your career 200th win. What did that moment teach you about your program?
That in the conference tournament, if we go back to that first year, it's what probably every coach, every team wants is to play your best basketball late.
In March,
and
right? Yes.
I can't tell you that we had the secret recipe. I just think we were really playing well. And, I thought they had a really, really good team at that point as well. I really wish we didn't have to play 3 games in 3 days in a row. I would have loved that. We needed that extra day. But the same thing with BYU. Those are just big moments for program building of, for your team as a whole. And really, it doesn't matter if it's BYU, non-D1, or somebody in your conference, of just this consistency of just how you show up every night and you want to be prepared. And somehow that game, we were able to come back. We hit a big 3 late against BYU. And then we literally had free throws to put it away. We missed them both. And then we go into overtime. And we're able to get that win. And yes, it was a big win at the time because our program has not beaten a Power 4, Power 5 school in a lot of years. So I think there's steps forward. Now, still, you got to compete in the Big Sky. There's, other bigger games, I think, in my mind. But it was a big game, and it happened to be the 200th win for me. And I had no clue. And I almost wish it wasn't.
What? I was just going to ask you. I'm like, I hope there was a cake, or you stopped and you went somewhere and celebrated somehow. That's huge.
I had no clue. And like I said, it almost bothered me because I wanted it to be about the players because it was such a big moment for them to kind of break through and have a great win. And then here everybody's talking about that. And it happens, and all it means is you had a lot of great players and a lot of great support staff and assistants, that help you get to that point if you get to 200 victories.
200 is a big number, though. That's where I remember when you won your 200, that I just remember taking a thoughtful pause. So you have to, congratulations on that. So if everyone didn't stop and congratulate you, we're going to really play it up, because that is a lot of games. And you think about, that's a lot of heartache. When you think about how many games you've coached, and how many times you've had to pull through, I think that's just phenomenal. So congrats, Coach Mattio. So
thank you, Krista.
Currently, Northern Colorado comes into non-conference play right now. You're 8-2. You're at the top of the standings. Your Bears have been very strong at home, winning 5 games in Greeley, while also picking up some key road and neutral site wins, including a very tight victory over DePaul and Omaha, and 2 overtime wins. So you've had some big tests early. What have these statement wins shown you about the resiliency of your team?
Yeah, we've had some close games, and 2 overtime games, and then DePaul was literally at the buzzer with like 0.5 seconds. One, it shows that we don't want to put ourselves in that position to have to keep playing those close games. So we've talked about that, turnovers and things like that we can improve on. But it's really hard to script those moments. All coaches, you can work on a late game situation. You can use your practice guys. You can do whatever you want to do, but it's really hard to script it, with those in-game moments. Mm-hmm. And so we've had some of that experience. And what I believe is because of the players that we've had back, some returners, now there's some maturity in some of those moments too. Because we know and our team knows it could have gone the other way. So that we've been in so many of those moments that we literally could be 3 and whatever as well. So we're just fortunate that we were able to, execute well in some of those late game situations. And the DePaul game, that's actually a beautiful arena in Chicago. And I had never played there, coached there before. And so Campbell University was a really good team as well. So that tournament was good for us to go against some strong talent that really forced us. You're on the road. You don't have a lot of fans there. Mm-hmm. So back to our team collectively, I think every year you kind of have an identity. You kind of know who you are, but then also the team takes on an identity too. And that's what some of those moments help create.
What I've also noticed is you've gotten production from so many different players. And I've had, I've been able to have these conversations with CT at the end of my podcast, and we've given you a lot of credit, but it just feels like there's production from so many different players. Nina George, your 5'8" sophomore, has been giving you incredible points and minutes and poise as a sophomore. Anaya Hall, 6'3" senior, Tatum West, 6'2" junior, all leading scoring in different games. How do you think that's helped establish this identity?
I would say it's just still non-conference play. I hope that it translates into conference play of having kind of the strength in numbers. As we all know, some of the best teams in the top of the league, they have this depth. If you look at the Montana State from last year, it didn't matter who they had in. They had starters coming off the bench. And I think, that depth allows you to be strong and not just live and die off of one or two players. And so that is our hope, is that as our players continue to grow and mature, that we do have different players every night, and you don't really care who the leading scorer is. You just want to get the job done and get the win on the court.
Anaya Hall, double-digit scorer, key rebounder. I feel like her interior presence, Kristen, has been really strong. Can you speak to her a little bit and the player that she's developed into?
Yeah, she's one of our players that, we recruited her during COVID, and we knew who she was. And she actually had quite a few Division I opportunities, but we were at West Texas when we were recruiting her, so Division II school. And, literally her story is the day I accepted the job here in Northern Colorado, literally within a 3-hour window, her mom calls me, and she did not know, nobody knew I had accepted it here. And the mom was like, hey, we really want to just come on a visit because, whatever it was, we built a relationship. And she wasn't happy with all the other D1 schools that she had. And then I was like, well, I told her, I said, hey, I just took a different job and I'm going to go out of state. It's in Colorado. And they were sold from the beginning. And so we've known Anaya since she was young. And her growth has been tremendous since she has been here. And so it's been really cool to watch. Anaya has a great personality. If you're just hanging out with her on the side, She's kind of the life of the party. You know, she has the ability. We had a Christmas party at my house the other night, and you know, it's ping pong, it's whatever. She's talking trash to her teammates. But the growth on the court continues for her. And it didn't come easy because most people don't know this, but she had little knee surgery before she came. So we actually didn't even have her for she was here, but she wasn't participating. So her whole entire freshman summer, you know, she didn't get any reps. And actually, we didn't get her freshman year till October, November, like fully released. And then we just threw her out there because we needed a post player. Yeah. And so it probably wasn't fair for her. And sometimes she'd be like, Coach, why are you running these plays for me? And she'd take off and travel. But I'm like, you know, we see the future. We see that there's going to be a future. So we're putting you in these situations right now to hopefully help you along quicker. So she is a force in our league. When we first got here, we didn't really feel like there were a lot of true like fives and post players. Since then, I think we have. I think when Mark Campbell came, you know, he had a couple of really good post players. And there are still some tremendous posts in our league, but she's just unique because she's strong and can finish well around the rim. And there's not a lot of posts, you know, like her.
I also really like the play of Tatum West, who, you know, she really led you in that win against DePaul. Can you speak to how she's developed as a player as well?
Tatum, you know, if you watch her, you can see that she's mobile and she can run for days. She's really focused on her game this past summer. And what I like about her, she's got some fight in her. And what you don't like about her is that she got some fight in her. You know, I think what she's really learned is how to impact the game. And, you know, you can see her rebounding numbers have greatly increased. She's one of the top, and she's had several double-doubles. She's shooting almost 80% from the free throw line right now. That hasn't been the case. So she's locked in, and there's a maturity now behind knowing like what her strengths are and areas that she could improve on, and she's really taken off in that area. But in the bigger picture, it's her leadership. So how she shows up every day, how she's leading her teammates right now. So those are the things that have really like begun to set her apart of, you know, how she performs and expectations, you know, behind all that. She was one of the top kids in Texas. She had 20-something Division I offers. So we were really excited to get her and her whole family to come here.
So taking a look around the Big Sky, have you had a chance to look at any of the other teams? I know we've mentioned just a little bit about Montana State. You know, they're sitting at 6-2. Big win against UNLV, and then the 1-point thrilling victory against Colorado. Idaho sits at 8-4, and also Eastern and Idaho State are right there. Do you feel like there's a lot of parity in the league?
There's a lot of great teams. As a matter of fact, maybe some of the teams that aren't winning as much as they were like right now, I still and I haven't studied the teams. And as a matter of fact, I was thinking this the other day, we're not even playing a lot of the same teams. So I fully, you know, Colorado and Montana State played, and we play Colorado on Tuesday. So that is the one team now that I've like watched a game, but a lot of the other teams we've played, I haven't, you know, in our non-conference play, none of our other conference teams have played, at least yet for us. So of course I keep up, but I think our conference is really, really good this year. You know, Montana State, obviously Montana returning a lot with Nate. Idaho State has returned a lot of players, so you just see the growth behind kind of that. You know, they have a lot of familiar faces, and they know what they're doing, and they're doing it at another level now. Idaho, they put points on the board like no other. I'm probably missing schools. Eastern Washington, very well coached. All the coaches are really good in this league. I learn from them every year because they keep you on your toes. Every, you know, conference game is a battle. And I'll use like Seton as an example because you don't know what he's going to do, but you know he's going to do something good against you. And so that's what, you know, makes this conference so great is that these coaches know adjustments. You know, Sac State, Coach Calhoff, you know, he's the fun coach of the league. I'll tab him as, you know.
He's spontaneous. I give you that. He's a little energetic on the sideline. You always get a good show. As this December schedule winds down, do you, as a coach, Coach Mattio, do you look at it as 3 different seasons, like non-conference, conference, and then basically it starts over in March? Is that how you handle it with your players?
Yes, in moments. It is 3 different seasons because nobody does care what you did in non-conference, but it means everything as you're kind of building a resume for conference play. So I think every season is a growing opportunity, and you can split it up a little bit because we get to conference play And yes, you're fighting now for a Big Sky championship. And I would assume most coaches kind of split it up. And then you get to Big Sky tournament, and then everybody says the whole, it's everybody's 0-0. It starts over again. But I do think there's a feel of how you're playing and the growth behind your team and the mindset behind it. And so there's, even for us right now, we still have some really good teams in front of us, which is Colorado and UC Davis and Sam Houston. I think Sam Houston has number 10 defense in the country right now. So it's hard to think about conference play, but it's also right there. You can't really have a good Christmas because conference is right behind it. And you're thinking about that first conference game, which for us is Montana State. So, yes, we do break it up a little bit, and that's probably the best way.
Coach Mattio, do you have any mentors? I mean, I know we've talked about Mark Kellogg. Do you have any that have also inspired you and that continue to inspire you? Are any thoughtful phrases? I feel like you always have good sayings and you always bring up this gold in every interview. But could you just give us a little bit of that Coach Mattio gold here as we wind down our interview?
Dang. Okay. I study a lot of different people because I just always think knowledge is power. And I do like to read. I listen to interviews. I like to hear perspectives on things. So you're not narrow-minded and kind of get tunnel vision. I would obviously put Mark up there as one of my number one mentors from the basketball side. But there's a lot of coaches I think that I learn from constantly, especially out on the road recruiting. Those are a great time to kind of pick their brains on how they do things, how they manage staff, how they hire people, because there's so much more than just X's and O's. So I don't know if I know I'm getting away from answering your question directly.
No, I think it's great.
I love to study, and there's just moments that you can do it more. As you get in season, it's a little bit tougher to do it, even though you always kind of want to stay filled up with what you're giving your team and kind of have a good word or a good nugget, to give. I think for me, I've always just tried to be in the moment and be where my feet are at. And so I don't look too far down the road. I also don't want to look in the rearview mirror. And in this profession, of course, it feels like it's performance-based, even though we know it's all about relationships too. Yeah. And I think that's what you keep at the forefront at the end of every day when you go home or after a long game or whatever it may be is, are you empowering these young females to help take this step on the court and then take the next step in life after they graduate and get their degree? And that the older that you get, that becomes the most fulfilling, at least through my eyes, it does.
So no doubt, Coach Mattio, your leadership is so admirable, and I've just really appreciated getting to know you over the years and being able to candidly just talk hoops with you. But what advice would you give girls who want to coach one day?
Well, hopefully not the advice that Pat Summitt gave me of if you don't know anything else to do in life, then coach. I love mentoring people that want to get into coaching. And as a matter of fact, when I first became a head coach at West Texas, my first year, the WBCA had just started there. It was like first year head coach mentorship. And they called me and they said, hey, will you be like a guinea pig is literally what they said. And I was like, sure, I have nothing to lose. I've never been a head coach before. And then they paired me up with a coach named Jamie White, who actually used to be the head coach here years ago at Northern Colorado, and then went to Fresno State from here. And so I will help. We've had a lot of managers go on to be coaches too. And I think you have to just get your foot in the door and stay connected and be around. I think some of the easiest things are like summer camps. Every coach wants to just bring in somebody young that just loves to work and loves the game, loves to teach. And I think there's a lot of growth behind that as well in some of those moments too. So even our players, I have several players that want to be a coach, and I love it. And sometimes, like our point guard, Nina George, she wants to be a coach. So I said, Coach George, what would you do in this situation? Because I just tell her, I'm just putting it out there. I know you're going to be a coach one of these days. And she sees the game like that. And so, I think it's just you have to be around and get involved and just do things with excellence. I think that stands out. That was me because I didn't really have a way to get my foot in the door either. I didn't play at a Power 5 school. It wasn't anything special. I didn't have Pat Summitt, writing my resume or writing a note for me. But it started for me as just doing good work for the athletic director at the school I went to. And then he was able to recommend me from there. And so I think that's where it starts, and let people will find you. They will find the work that you do.
I love that whole view on being a mentor, because you sure are a mentor to many. And I think that gives a lot of inspiration for young players and young females. So Coach Mattio, this has been such a great interview. Is there anything you'd like to add?
I think, it's really cool what you're doing with just bringing to light basketball, women's basketball in the Big Sky. It's been really awesome because, as you said, we're learning a lot about each other. Mm-hmm. And this league, starting from the top, and the two coaches that have been here the longest, Coach Ben and Seton, they've really kind of helped set the standard for how things are done. And I will add, and I've heard this before, but it really is true. I really feel like a lot of the coaches want this league to continue to have success and to grow. And when we get into our coaches' meetings, there's an idea that pops up on the table, and we all got to hash it out. And of course, everybody sees it from their perspective, how it affects them first. But ultimately, when it comes back, you can see that everybody says, we need this league to grow. We want it to be the best that it can be. And so I think that that's really cool to have, that mentorship with some of the other coaches. And then I'm kind of in the middle, I guess, because I got here, there was 5 new coaches, myself, Jody, and I'm sure I'm leaving people out.
Well, we have a couple new faces this year, and Laura Dinkins and Carly Burress. So also just new faces, right? So we have this veteran group that, a Coach Binford and a Coach Soboleski, 18th and 21st season. But now you're becoming one of those coaches that has been in the league to see an entire class shift through. So I guess that would be one other question for you is, how do you bring in these other coaches? Do you give them some words of advice being a first-year coach in the Big Sky?
Krista. I wish I could say that we did. I have not met them. I'm excited to meet them. I think, no, I didn't send anybody flowers.
I would hope not. I would hope there's no flower exchange.
I'm just kidding. But no, I'm excited. I'm excited that they're in our league.
Right.
Again, I think what I think through is my first year, when you're taking over a program and what that feeling is. So I'm sure when those moments, when I get face to face, I'm sure there'll be some moments of just asking, how's the transition? How's it going? Because we all know it's a lot when you move your family and change locations and are pouring yourself into a program and building it. So I'm excited from that side to see, the growth that they get to, the stamp that they get to put on those programs.
Thank you so much for your time today, Coach Mattio.
Thank you, Krista. I appreciate it.
We are continuing around the Big Sky in women's hoops, and I am so excited each week to have Carla C.T. Taylor, former Weber State standout and the program's all-time winningest coach, join me each week. This segment is proudly brought to you by the Big Sky Conference, and it is never too soon to start thinking about Big Sky Championships in Boise, March 7th through the 11th. I'm going to put up a link that will give you a 10% discount for session tickets on the men or women's side. Just really happy to have the Big Sky Conference as our show partner. CT, welcome in.
Thanks, Krista. Excited to be back here again with you this week and talk about what's going on around the Big Sky with women's basketball.
Well, it's just starting to wind down with this non-conference schedule as everyone's going to be taking these holiday breaks, and then we're going to be getting into conference play. But there's definitely some key teams that are emerging as leaders. I had a chance to visit with Kristen Mattio, which was a great visit, and she was on the show this week, and her Northern Colorado Bears on a 3-game winning streak and really doing a lot well.
Right. We talked a lot about her last week, even the Northern Colorado, just a team with a lot of depth and a lot of weapons. And they just continued to, they're on, like you say, a rampage. They're really playing well in the preseason, and I'm sure gaining a lot of confidence, getting ready for the next season, which is the Big Sky Conference regular season.
Well, another team that's just doing great is Eastern Washington, and we haven't really stopped and visited about them, CT, for the last few weeks on a 3-game winning streak. Elin is the player of the week, Elin Bowers, and she had a tremendous last 3 games. They get the really nice win against Washington State. What do you think about Eastern Washington?
Well, for Bowers, she was the player of the week as a true freshman. That's pretty amazing to come in fresh out of high school as a true freshman and be able to put up the numbers that she's putting up. 18 points. Player of the week, she had 20 points, 7 rebounds, 4 assists, and 3 steals. Wow, as a true freshman, really impressed with her play. I didn't get to see their games last week, but Eastern Washington, another team that just continues to get better and better and solid. They've got, the Montana rebounding machine with Courtney Grossman. She had 18 boards. I mean, they're amazing. The Eastern Washington, the Eagles are really putting together a great team.
CT, we got to stop and talk about Courtney Grossman, because not only did she had 18 rebounds against Washington State, but then she had 17 against South Dakota, and then she had her career high of 23 rebounds against Denver. I mean, they swept the Summit League, but I mean, how in the world? Those are massive stats right there.
Right. I loved her last year as a freshman. Just couldn't believe that the state of Montana let her out, and good for Jody to recruit a kid like that. She's so athletic, and rebounders like that just have a nose for the ball. They're in the right place at the right time. They don't wait to see where the ball's coming off. They've already positioned themselves, especially offensive rebounding wise, but defensive rebounding, she's a brute. I mean, she is a strong, solid kid.
Like, being a former player, CT, I feel like rebounds were just so precious, right? I mean, you try so hard. I was a big, but 6 feet, 6'1", but It is so hard to get a board. I just can't. 23 is just unbelievable to me.
Well, you're a little bit thinner than Courtney Grossman. Courtney Grossman's got some shoulders and some arms on her and solid legs. I don't know if she was a track athlete, but she has a solid track athlete type body. Again, it's so much of rebounding too is desire. You got to be willing to fly around and go after the rebound, and you hope you don't come down on somebody's ankles. But she's amazing. I don't know what else to say, but she's amazing.
Rounding out some other real stars for Eastern Washington, Ella Gallatin had 22 points against Washington State. JC Eggers, 18 points in 33 minutes of play. And they're giving some added length in rounding out that starting 5. But really, Coach Gleason has been able to rely on about 5 key players to give her consistent scoring this year.
Yep, and they've played solid. I mean, they're playing good preseason schedule too. The win over Washington State, I mean, that's a Eastern Washington beating Washington State. That's a huge feather in your cap as a Big Sky team, being able to beat the bigger school, right? That's not far from them. And,
right. Hasn't happened since 2015.
Right. That, again, such a feather in their cap for that win. I see they're going to play, next up is at Santa Barbara, which is, again, they're not playing an easy schedule. They're 6-4 right now, and some really good wins. I think they have Santa Barbara, and then they're Bakersfield, was it Bakersfield?
Yep, they've got Bakersfield, next? Yes, and then they've got Bushnell before they open up against Idaho right away in January.
Wow.
But
what an interesting matchup that will be, right?
Right.
In the first conference, I know. I'm so excited for January to get here. I mean, I don't want to bypass Christmas and all that, but I'm just excited to see the pairings that first week in the Big Sky Conference regular season and see how everybody fares.
Are there any other players, CT, that have really stood out to you? Before we got on this, I sent you the stats through the accumulative stats, and it is interesting to look at our leaders in Naomi White and Kylie Brown, both for NAU and Portland State. They're at the bottom part of the standings for wins, but they have really given a lot of offense. And what I look at when I see that is they put together a couple other weapons, and they could really put together some nice basketball and conference play, which just makes the Big Sky Conference more competitive.
Well, I said to you earlier, Idaho State is another team that's playing really, really well. I watched their BYU game at BYU. They were up at the half by 4 points. I mean, they play I mean, I'm sorry, but Seton Sobolewski's teams play harder than any team I believe I've ever watched. And it's year after year. Their hustle, their toughness, their rebounding ability, their ability to get the 50-50 ball. But the flip of that is they're struggling to score. I think they only scored 8 points in that fourth quarter, but they were in the game at BYU to the very end and still scrapping and trapping and rebounding and defending. They just struggled to score in that game, or they would have beat BYU at BYU, which is not an easy feat.
Let's give just a big shout out to Tasia Jordan, too. Yeah. I mean, she's right in the middle of the...
22 points. She had 22 points against BYU, and a taller BYU team. But we've talked about how she has the ability to elevate over the defense and score inside the paint, and she did that against BYU.
I always look when I'm looking at stats too, is she's leading, she's right in the middle for scoring, but also rebounding. She gets after it on the glass. And so when you look at those kids that lead in multiple statistical categories, or they're right in there, their game is adding in so many other elements. And I feel like Tasia Jordan just elevates this Idaho State team.
Yep. And like I said, they all play hard. They play hard. They're on the ground after the ball. They rebound. They cover up when on their offensive end, when the opponents get a rebound, they cover it up, and they're just tenacious and remind me a lot of a Montana State, just the way they play so hard for 40 minutes. Montana
State had a tough loss, but they're still right in the mix, and they've had a tremendous non-conference run. And
that game at Oregon, it was a respectable loss. It's hard to go into those bigger Oregon, Washington, Arizona, those bigger schools as a mid-major, but they competed. And I just saw the remarks by Coach Binford that she didn't feel like the first half they played the tempo that they felt comfortable, and they did in the fourth quarter. But usually those bigger schools have bigger players, taller, and they have more depth, and it tends to make it difficult to go into their place. Now you take Oregon and put them at Montana State, and Montana State, it's a closer game and an opportunity to win. But you're never going to get those schools to come because they don't want to lose to a Big Sky team, but they'll play you at home. So that's the scheduling. We talked about this before, but it's the scheduling difficulties. The bigger schools have a lot more to lose than the mid-major, so they won't play at the mid-major's home court.
Such a great point, CT. So give us an update on Weber State. We look at Emma Nope, who's just almost dominating. She's right behind Courtney Grossman for leader in the league for rebounding.
They had Western Montana that I believe the last game that I called, and Emma Nope didn't play a whole lot in that game because Weber State was up by so much. But Weber State now has those role players that they brought in that are starting to come along and gain confidence and not have to count on Lene Billy and Antoinette Emma Nope to do everything. You've got these role players now that have settled in, and they've got she's decided on a starting lineup, and you just can't say enough about what Coach Jackson does. She just is tremendous with her players and calm and teaches and coaches. And then the addition of Yowzy gives them a little spark, and she's a fire plug. I love her, and they're playing well. And they have another game tonight, and it's against another NAIA team. We'll see how that goes, but they had a rough time on the road. The in-state schedule that they played,
was really
and they
tough.
Were in games, so
they really were.
Really like to see, and they're playing well. They're really starting to gel.
The games against Western Montana and NAIA school, I think those might be really good for confidence builders, as well as giving some kids more minutes that maybe wouldn't see that. And, I'm really finding the trend, CT, is confidence. And some of these schedules have just taken the wind out of Montana, for instance.
I saw that they lost another game, and I just think you have somebody like Mac Koning, who's so good, and she's not the type of player that will lose her confidence, or Avery Waddington, she won't either. It's your support kids that you worry about. And, I'm just hoping for Montana to break out of the losing slump. And
they've definitely got a style of play where they like to put up threes. So and it's one of those, it's feast or famine at times, CT, where you can look really good and they've got some great shooters, and so I look to them to really rely on that part of their game. The problem with that is, though, not really good rebounding positioning. Oftentimes it's one shot up and then you're going the other way unless you're hot. It's just hard when you're that far away from the basket. And I'm telling you, their transition offense is a strength of theirs, but it's also keeping that in check, right? Knowing when to make the pass and
when to push and when to not, when you need to, slow it down and make sure you run your offense. And the hard thing with counting on offense to win games is you don't have control of that. And that's why, it's an old adage, but defense wins championships because you can control what your team's doing defensively. You don't always have control offensively. There's too many variables, and if your team's not shooting well, or depending on how other people defend you. So defense dictates offense.
And I think you're seeing that with a Northern Colorado and an Idaho and a Montana State, the three teams that are at the top right now of league standings. They all give consistent defensive effort. Now, in visiting with Coach Marrera, he said, Krista, we were all defense because we had to be last year. This year we have some more offensive weapons, but he'll never get away from that fundamental style of always playing hard. And I see that with Coach Mattio's Northern Colorado Bears, too. She throws up some different defensive strategies, but she is a defensive-minded coach. And that you are absolutely right that you weather so many offensive lulls, right, when you play tough defense.
Right. And, usually teams shoot better at home, but that's not always the case either. And you're playing home and away, so you have to hang your hat, I believe. You have to hang your hat on defense and rebounding, and then that creates your offense, and you're not worrying about the offense. You're playing hard on defense, you're rebounding, and those are the things you have control of.
CT, it is always great to get your opinion, and we are going to take a little break for the holidays, but we will be back at it with conference play, and I'm so excited to continue to get your opinion.
Well, and I hope everybody has a nice holiday. The players, it'll be a good little break for them. Some of those young, new kids, a little bit homesick. So Christmas is always good to be able to go home and be with their families, and just hope everybody has a nice holiday.
Thank you, CT. Thanks as well to Kristen Mattio, head women's basketball coach for the University of Northern Colorado, for the insight and for taking the time with me today. And thanks to all of you for listening. This week's episode of the Krista Redpath Show was brought to you by Vertical Raise and the Big Sky Conference. Coming up next week, we will continue to take you around the Big Sky in women's hoops.